Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Soul Land 2 Peerless Tang Men based on novel. So let's start. After Wang Chua explained the secret behind the golden dragon spear, even Wang Donga didn't think that she had taken advantage of Hui Yuhao by fusing with the bloody Baboon King soul ring. However, Hui Yuhao could tell from the look in Wang Donga's eyes that she was still unconvinced by Wang Chua. Just when everyone was about to carry on with their journey, that all came alert again. They all turned in one direction, alerted by Hui Yuhao's spiritual detection. 3 figures had entered Hui Yuhao's spiritual detection, but they weren't soul beasts, they were humans. Without a doubt, they must be soul masters, since they could venture so deep into the Great Star Doe forest. But the group from Shrek didn't feel any sense of camaraderie even though they had met fellow soul masters. In this forest, it might not be a good thing to meet other soul masters. Everyone who came here was hunting soul beasts to obtain soul rings. Conflicts might arise if they targeted the same soul beasts. At this point, Zhong Leshuan and Han Ruoruo demonstrated their rich wealth of experience. A depression was formed in the ground as moonlight flashed. Streaks of dazzling golden ropes flashed past, and the corpses of the inked leopards were dragged into the depression. Moonlight blinked again, and the ground was leveled. The entire process was completed in a few seconds. Hui Yuhao only realized what was happening after a moment. The corpses were buried in order to prevent the other party from deducing the extent of their abilities. Just as they finished concealing the inked leopards, the 3 strangers arrived in front of them. When Hui Yuhao saw them for the first time, he was slightly stunned. A strong sense of crisis started to fill him. They were 3 elders that looked at least 70 years old. The shocking thing was that they looked exactly the same. They were even dressed the same way. They were all very thin, but they had lots of wrinkles on their faces. Their grayish-white hair flowed behind their backs. Their eyes were a dim yellow, and gave off a lifeless feeling. The only special trait about them was that they all had aquiline noses and thin lips. The elder on the right was a little stunned as he looked at Cai Maya. He twisted his lips and said, "No wonder you dare to act so big in front of me." 8-ringed cultivation? Hui Yuhao observed silently from one side and nodded his head in approval. Whether it was Zhong Leshuan or Cai Maya, they had revealed their 8-ringed cultivation to confuse their opponents. However, he was also shocked. The 3 elders' ability to tell Cai Maya's cultivation meant that their own cultivations were not below 8 rings. 3 soul Doluor who appeared hostile, they weren't going to be easy to deal with. Cai Maya remained calm. "It seems like you're also a soul Doluor. Why do you have to bully us, then?" "I'm only bringing these kids to obtain some soul rings. The forest is so huge. I'm sure we won't obstruct the 3 of you." The elder on the right laughed and replied, "Whether you obstruct me is not up to you to comment. Let's do it this way. Help us do something, and we'll set you free. You should know that it's impossible for you to deal with the 3 of us if there's only one soul Doluor on your side." The elder in the center said, "Yes, all of you can go after you help us complete this task." The elder on the left followed with, "It might even be beneficial for all of you. If the soul beasts that you hunt along the way are suitable for you, you can absorb their soul rings after everything is over." Cai Maya was moved as she said, "Considering your cultivations, I'm afraid what you want us to complete isn't an easy task. Furthermore, we don't have many resources with us, and we're pressed for time." The elder on the right said, "I don't think you have a choice. If you wish to remain here forever, I don't mind wasting more effort. Furthermore, it's not far from here." The elder in the center said, "Let's cut the nonsense. Follow us." As he spoke, the 3 elders unleashed their martial souls at the same time. Something strange happened. Their right hands that were holding their staves turned grayish and were engulfed by a layer of grayish scales. These scales quickly spread to the rest of their bodies, including their faces. Their staffs even emanated intense grayish light. The gems also lit up and started to glow with a fresh red color. The elder on the right was Shong Litian, the one in the center was Shong Luren, and the one on the left was Shong Lidi. They were named Heaven, Tien, Earth, Di, and Man, Ren. Their surname was also very weird. Cai Maya had no recollection of them. They were soul Duluos, and should be renowned on the continent, but Cai Maya had never heard of them. This showed that they deliberately tried not to leave an impression behind them. Cai Maya glanced over at Zhong Leshuan and said, "Everyone, follow them. Maintain the formation. We'll help the 3 of them complete their task before we continue to search for soul beasts." Cai Maya and Zhong Lushuan's gazes met, and Zhong Lushuan immediately understood her intention. How would this Shrek Academy team be afraid of three Soul Delure given their makeup? Cai Maya didn't choose to conflict with the three elders because she wanted to find out their true intentions and was also waiting to exploit a better opportunity. The three elders walked in front in exactly the same way. They retracted their martial souls, and their staves regained their original looks. However, the intense undulations from these Class 8 soul tools still left a deep impression on Huo Hao. Huo Hao could clearly sense that the most important part of the staves were the gems at the top. The gems were empty, but there seemed to be extremely intricate formation arrays within them. It was just that the strong undulations of soul power released by the formation arrays prevented Huo Hao's spiritual detection from looking into them. However, he could still subtly sense that they were similar to Electrolux's staff. The three elders were very quick, but they weren't too far in front of the rest. When the gap grew, they would stop to wait, and weren't exactly impatient. Cai Maya reduced her speed as she led the team. When Zhong Lushuan started to move, she signaled "for" with her hand. Her instructions were clear: everyone was supposed to maintain their speed at a 4-ring cultivation level. Their speed was still quite fast even at this level. The three elders had mentioned that it wasn't very far, but they still took 2 hours before reaching their destination. The three of them stopped, and Zhong Litian turned back to look at the Shrek group. He gestured for everyone to maintain their silence. The three brothers were cautious at this point. They were even slightly tense. Cai Maya came up beside the three of them and asked softly, "Elders, can you tell us what we're supposed to do?" Zhong Litian said softly, "There's a cave not far from here. There's a living soul beast inside the cave. We'll try to draw it out later. What you have to do is to attack it and kill it, just like that." Cai Maya was a little doubtful as she asked. The three of them lack offensive strength? It can't be this simple. Zhong Litian was certain as he said, "Just like that. That fellow is very cunning. We're not scared of it, and you don't have to unleash an all-out attack against it intentionally. Just don't let it run away. It's very fast, and can be considered an agility-type soul beast. Form a semicircle first. Liren, go and draw it out." Huo Hao, Cai Maya, and Zhong Lushuan became nervous as they reached this point. Even Cai Maya's self-confidence wavered slightly. Why? Evil soul masters. Zhong Liren's ability could only come from an evil soul master. It wasn't just red, but the color of blood. Huo Hao projected the aura of desolation exuded by the rat-like soul beast using his spiritual detection in their minds. The thick, bloody sense and quivering spirit were characteristics special to evil soul masters. Huo Hao finally understood what the Class 8 walking staffs were for. They were used to seal the spirits of soul beasts. Zhong Liren was summoning a soul beast spirit to achieve his goal. The blood-red light flashed before disappearing, and the earth started to shake. A furious roar sounded from the cave in front of the ancient tree. A head popped out from the cave. Huo Hao was shocked when he saw this head. It was a soul beast that he recognized. It had dark golden fur and ferocious-looking eyes. There was also its terrifying aura. It was undoubtedly an extremely strong dark golden terraclaw bear. From the size of its head, Huo Hao could tell that it was much stronger than the dark golden terraclaw bear he had met earlier. Is this a 10,000-year dark golden terraclaw bear? A dark golden terraclaw bear with a 10,000-year cultivation could challenge an ordinary 100,000-year soul beast. If this was a 10,000-year terraclaw bear, it was as dangerous as a title Dolor. The three elders wanted to deal with a 10,000-year dark golden terraclaw bear. No wonder they couldn't kill it on their own. After provoking the bear, Zhong Liren retreated swiftly. As he retreated, a frightening light projection flashed before disappearing. The dark golden terraclaw bear reached out its right arm from the cave. The terrifying dark golden light from it covered more than 50 meters and a 150-degree region in front of it. Wherever the dark golden light passed, all the plants were instantly torn apart. Its sharp and vicious aura even left 5 streaks of pitch-black marks in the air. The air had been clawed apart by it. It was simply too strong. This was the dark golden terraclaw bear. A transcendent soul beast that was equally powerful in offense and defense. If Zhong Liren hadn't retreated quickly, he might not have survived the bear's attack. A surprising scene occurred. The bear didn't rush out of its cave, and only let out a deafening and furious roar. Following this, Zhong Liren let out a piercing scream. After hearing his piercing scream, Zhong Litian and Zhong Lidi were both delighted. Jean Lidi couldn't help but say, "I want." The previous changes eventually still kindled Huiyuhao's suspicions. It was understandable for three Soul Dolor to be nervous against a dark golden terraclaw bear, but why did they need so many people to help them? Capturing the attention of this dark golden terraclaw bear wasn't going to help them in hunting and killing it. With their abilities, they could easily kill the bear. Why did they have to drag them along? What was the reason? Huiyuhao discovered the reason when he heard the bear screaming in pain. At this point, Jean Lidi and Jean Luren had just left, but they didn't attack the bear. When it screamed, the two of them stepped back deliberately. What about the dark golden terraclaw bear? Its head and arm were still outside, but it didn't leave the cave as it screamed. Huiyuhao started to explore further into the cave using his spiritual detection even at the expense of depleting more soul power. There must be something in the cave that the bear couldn't give up. He saw it very soon. The cave wasn't very big, and it was also not level. Evidently, the bear had dug it out with its own claws. Inside the cave, there was a huge amount of black blood. The bear's legs were actually trembling slightly. Within this pool of dark blood, there were two smaller fellows that were less than a meter long, gnawing on their fur. Their eyes weren't even open yet. This was actually a 10,000-year dark golden terraclaw bear that had just given birth, and was in a weakened state. It didn't leave its cave because it was too weak. At the same time, it was also trying to protect its two kids. Huiyuhao's heart softened when he sensed this. That was because he immediately recalled how his mother had protected him. Without a doubt, the three evil soul masters' target wasn't just the dark golden terraclaw bear. They were targeting its two kids too. With their abilities, no one knew how these two infant dark golden terraclaw bears were going to be exploited if they were captured. We have to stop them. The same thought arose in Cai Maya, Zhong Lishuan, and Huiyuhao's minds. At this point, Zhong Litian said, "Watch me. I'm going to make a move." Cai Maya nodded and turned around at the same time before gesturing to the group from Shrek. Her gesture seemed very simple, but every inner courtyard disciple knew what she meant: all-out attack. Undoubtedly, their target wasn't the dark golden terraclaw bear. Zhong Litian's back was facing everyone. He didn't seem to realize anything, or perhaps he was too self-confident. He lifted his staff slowly, and grayish scales started to engulf his body once again. His soul rings also drifted into everyone's view for the first time. Huiyuhao understood everything soon after. The spirit that Zhong Litian revealed must have had some close connection to the female bear in the cave. It might even have been her partner, and the father of the two infant bears. However, why did he do that? The male bear was likely to be stronger considering the strength of its spirit. Since the three of them could kill the male bear, why couldn't they deal with the female bear? Suddenly, a thought flashed across Huiyuhao's mind. He was reminded of what Wang Yang had mentioned before. There were very few dark golden terraclaw bears. That was why they couldn't use the strength of their species to rule the world of soul beasts even though they were individually very strong. However, why were there so few of them? Logically speaking, they should be better able to survive considering their immensely strong abilities. There was only one reason: their reproductive capabilities. They were bestowed with great strength, but were devoid of reproductive capabilities. Generally speaking, it was very difficult for a dark golden terraclaw bear to find a partner. That was because they would roam the world of soul beasts alone after they matured. They would also be invincible among all soul beasts of the same level. This characteristic was also a reason why it was difficult for them to carry on their lineage. Even when a male and female dark golden terraclaw bear met, they had to be interested in each other before they could mate. Wang Yang joked that dark golden terraclaw bears had different aesthetic standards compared to humans. It was very unlikely for two bears of opposing genders to fall for each other. If it was one-sided, violence might be a means to earn the rights to copulation. However, a female bear might still be able to resist a male bear even if she couldn't beat him. Both parties would be hurt as a result. Even if a male bear got his way, he might not be able to carry on his lineage. That was because the male and female beasts might not be sexually compatible, and thus the male bear's genes would be unable to be passed down. Furthermore, a dark golden terraclaw bear's estrus cycle was only once every 10 years. Each female bear could only bear 1 to 2 kids. Under such a situation, it was very difficult for them to prosper. Once every 10 years. It wasn't even a certainty. Some male bears might not even have their own kids for their entire life. This was the sad truth that dark golden terraclaw bears had to face. The sadder thing was that they belonged in the same world as humans. Legend had it that a dark golden terraclaw bear's cub could be tamed by humans. If they could be successfully tamed, the owner would possess terrifying fighting strength. Humans had also been trying their best to find their own cubs. Attack now. Cai Maya reacted decisively, and didn't hesitate any further. She lifted her right hand, and a gust of strong wind burst from her hand. It was aimed towards Zhong Litian. However, Zhong Litian turned into a waft of green smoke at this moment. He disappeared into the brutal winds, while the bloody male bear turned back. As he roared furiously, he clawed towards them with a tormented look in his eyes. It was his spiritual power. Although his spiritual power had been enhanced by the evil soul masters, it wasn't as strong as it was when he was still alive. At this point, the female bear had crawled out of her cave and was rushing forward with big steps. Her husband's voice was too familiar. His tormented screams and her yearning for him overcame her will to protect her kids. The three brothers exploited her feelings. Even though they were despicable, their evil thoughts were very unpredictable. Even Cai Maya hadn't expected such a disadvantageous situation. The strength of these two dark golden terraclaw bears was already very great. However, they were still strong enough to deal with these two bears. After all, Cai Maya was a titled Doluo. The missing three brothers were the problem. How long would they take to capture the two cubs? Would mercy be shown when they returned? By then, everyone from Shrek would have been weakened by these two dark golden terraclaw bears. Today's fight was very perilous. What do we do? This same thought appeared in everyone's minds. The first person to react was Hui Yuhao. After he shared everything with everyone through his spiritual detection, he started to act. As his figure flashed, he disappeared into the air. At this point, he wasn't standing beside Wang Donga. However, he had already shared his plan with everyone. He was going to stop the three brothers and take the two cubs away. Wang Donga quickly followed him. Hui Yuhao was the most important to her. Furthermore, their abilities were greatly enhanced when they were together. However, it was also at this moment that the male bear's attack arrived. His sharp, bloody claws descended from the sky, and his terrifying aura swept over everyone. The thick, bloody smell was nauseating. Wang Donga was about to advance, but she sensed the lethal threat and had no choice but to stop. Her wings beat, and she retreated quickly. At this point, Hui Yuhao had disappeared. Even his spiritual detection had disappeared. The last information Wang Donga received from him was to stay where she was to help the rest and not to follow him. He wanted to use a special method to deal with the three brothers. Even though Hui Yuhao was credible, Wang Donga was still a little frantic at this point. However, the male bear's attack was like a dancing, bloody cyclone as it swept towards everyone. Wang Donga was also one of its targets, and she couldn't escape. However, Hui Yuhao wasn't the only one who had moved away from the team. As Hui Yuhao moved, someone else also moved. As her slender figure flashed, she turned into a golden light projection that was faded into the forest. She moved in the same direction as Hui Yuhao. It was Wang Chioa. Cai Maya led the team as Zhong Leshuan, Han Ruoruo, Wang Donga, Li Yongyu, and Mo Xian worked together to resist the male bear's attack. The strength of the dark golden terraclaw bear was explosive. Even though this 10,000-year dark golden terraclaw bear was only left with his spirit, his fighting style didn't change at all. His terrifying fighting strength erupted and suppressed everyone. With Cai Maya's cultivation, it wasn't difficult for her to escape. However, she needed to protect her students. This was especially true for students like Mo Xian, who didn't possess any real fighting strength. Hui Yuhao didn't bother about the fight on the other side right now. He knew that the two bears couldn't kill them with Dean Cai around. What he had to do now was turn the situation around. It was only this way that his friends could escape from danger. Why didn't he drag Wang Donga along? That was because he wasn't confident. Even with Wang Donga, could he possibly challenge three Soul de Law? He decided to act alone because he would be completely disregarding any danger. As he burst forward, his third eye opened. His soul thrusters and spiritual detection were also initiated. At this point, he heard a sonorous dragon's roar. It was very unexpected, but it was filled with rage. Hui Yuhao's spiritual detection covered a large area. He immediately turned his head in the direction of the roar. He was appalled to discover that Wang Chioa had also separated from the team. Furthermore, her target was the female bear. Not good. Even though Wang Chua had demonstrated great abilities, Hu Yuhao didn't believe that she could fight a 10,000-year dark golden terraclaw bear by herself. Even Elder Xian had once mentioned how strong a 10,000-year dark golden terraclaw bear was. At the 10,000-year level, it was one of the best among the savage beasts. However, it was too late for Hu Yuhao to help Wang Chua at this point. Furthermore, could he even do anything with his current strength? It was time to make a decision. Hu Yuhao grit his teeth, and a huge cannon barrel was lifted onto his shoulder. This cannon was dark blue, and there were countless rose patterns on its body. If we're here, she would definitely recognize it as a giant lightning cannon. However, Hu Yuhao's cannon was covered by a mysterious glow. Whether it was the size or the number of formation arrays, cannon couldn't compare to this one. This was a giant lightning cannon, but it was also a Class 7 heavy cannon called the Lightning God's Fury. Hikaitu was the one who had developed it. Before they set off on this journey, Hu Yuhao had naturally told his partners where he was going. Hikaitu passed his Lightning God's Fury to him, and also gave him 3 compatible stationary soul cannon shells. Following this, the female bear was swallowed by the bluish-purple light. The terrifying lightning was changed into a shocking beam of light that shot into the sky. Rumbling thunder echoed in 3 waves, and the immense impact swept the entire area that the bluish-purple light had covered earlier. All the plants and trees were turned into ash by the terrifying impact and destructive force. Wang Chua crossed her arms in front of her body, and a layer of thick golden light emanated from her body. However, her body was still flung backward by the force. She flew close to 100 meters before she managed to stabilize her body. However, an intense numbness was running through her body. Yes, this was how terrifying a Class 7 stationary soul cannon was. Everything in front of Wang Chua had turned to ash. The female bear was smashed down, and her dark golden hide had turned charcoal black. Gusts of thick smoke rose from her fur as she collapsed to the ground in pain, lightning crackling around her. Even the Sun Moon Empire, which possessed the strongest soul tools, classified stationary soul cannons that were at Class 7 as weapons of mass destruction. They couldn't be sold. No one knew how many Class 7 stationary soul cannons the Sun Moon Empire possessed, but they had already become the biggest threat to the rest of the empires on the continent because of them. The cannon shell that Hu Yuhao just fired was worth 800,000 gold soul coins. That wasn't even including the time that Hikaitu had spent on developing it. If it were auctioned off, the cannon would be worth more than 3 million gold soul coins. What if it was fired towards an elite team of soldiers? Everything in a 300-meter radius would be turned to ash. Any soul master below a 6-ringed cultivation could forget about escaping. How many people possessed strength as immense as Wang Chua? That was the reason why Hu Yuhao had dared to fire that cannon shell. At this point, the air was filled with intense undulations of lightning. The frightening explosive force shocked everyone. Even though the shockwave only generated a surging gust of air when it reached them, this sudden explosion changed the situation for Shrek Academy's team. Hu Yuhao retracted his spiritual detection after he fired his cannon. The terrifying bolts of lightning were too much for his spiritual power to handle. The huge explosion sounded behind him, but he continued to dart forward. At this point, he placed the second cannon shell into the giant lightning cannon on his shoulder. As the surging gust of air reached him, he initiated his spiritual detection again. This time, his target was the cave. The 3 brothers weren't affected even after the first cannon shell exploded. However, the explosion still caught their attention. Zhong Lidi and Zhong Luren drifted towards the cave as they tapped their staves on the ground. Zhong Litian didn't appear, and no one knew where he was hiding. However, it wasn't difficult to guess that he had focused most of his energy on everyone from Shrek Academy. Hu Yuhao's second cannon shell was fired at this time. When the cannon was fired, he revealed his concealed figure. A horrifying bluish-purple radiance was unleashed, and its targets were the 2 cubs in the cave. What were Zhong Lidi and Zhong Luren's cultivations? They were evil soul Doluo. In a duel, their abilities weren't inferior to a title Doluo. Their spiritual power and senses were very strong. They immediately sensed the threat that was coming. At this point, they had already arrived at the cave. Any normal person wouldn't enter the cave even if he was threatened. However, they couldn't give up on the 2 cubs in the cave. The cubs were the most important reason they were here. Hu Yuhao had experienced many live fights during his training in the Ultimate Soldier Plan. Both his situational judgment and understanding of a human's psychological mindset had reached a high standard. Zhong Lidi and Zhong Luren made their choice immediately. They only had one choice: defend. They could only defend against the attack unleashed towards the cave and protect the two cubs. While Zhong Lidi and Zhong Liren were very strong, evil soul masters were only strong because they were evil. In terms of cultivation, they were still 8-ringed soul d'allure. They were confident of success, but were faced with a sudden attack. In a state of panic, they weren't able to unleash their all-out defense. In addition, they weren't skilled at defending, either. As the terrifying sounds of crackling lightning echoed out, countless bolts of lightning struck, and the two elders were appalled to discover that the intimidating explosive force had torn apart their defense. The bloody barrier dissipated. As lightning flashed, the thick protective barrier was forcefully torn apart. The horrifying explosive force also swept the two of them up. Lightning was formed by the vital energy of heaven and earth. This was what Electrolux had told Hu Yuhao. Any form of undead would be harmed far more greatly than normal, regardless of what element they once were, if they were struck by lightning, because lightning contained the vital energy of heaven and earth. When some undead became too strong, they might attract lightning from the sky due to their evil aura. This was called a lightning catastrophe. Why was Electrolux so strong in his original world? One important reason was that he was an unprecedented light-type necromancer. He used his own body to summon the light element of the undead, thus removing any evil energy from them. In this way, they wouldn't attract the lightning catastrophe. Hu Yuhao had guessed some of the abilities that the three evil soul masters possessed. It had to be something related to summoning soul beast spirits. They were even able to summon the spirit of a 10,000-year dark golden terraclaw bear. If this wasn't their main ability, they probably weren't soul d'allure, but title d'allure. That was why Hu Yuhao used the giant lightning cannon. The power of lightning was more effective against these two evil soul masters. Anyone whose life was under threat would definitely use whatever treasures they had without any hesitation as long as they could protect their life. The two brothers weren't exceptions either. When they realized something was amiss, they immediately unleashed their all. A huge number of bloody spirits surged out from their staves and protected their bodies, resisting the power of lightning. At the same time, they also revealed their martial soul true bodies. In this state, Zhong Lidi and Zhong Liren's bodies started to distort. The greyish scales became finer, and even their eyes turned blood red. They turned and curled up into two huge greyish snakes. Shrek Academy's research into martial souls was very advanced. Hu Yuhao could immediately recognize what their martial souls were. Underworld Snake, a classic evil soul master's martial soul. It had existed for a long time, and was a very strong soul among evil soul masters. Furthermore, Hu Yuhao could vaguely recall Elder Mu emphasizing how special an underworld snake was. However, he had no time to think about it at this point. After his soul power reached rank 50, all his spirit eye soul skills were enhanced. This was his strongest advantage from the million-year Skydream Ixworm. He had not used imitation for a long time, not because it wasn't strong enough, but because he hid it due to the surprises it brought him after it was enhanced. He tried his best not to use it. Imitation wasn't an offensive or defensive soul skill. Compared to the Snow Emperor's three ultimate techniques, the Dark Golden Terraclaws, the Ice Explosion technique, Spiritual Shock, and other powerful soul skills, it didn't seem very eye-catching. Even Hu Yuhao's partners didn't really pay attention to this soul skill. However, it had become an extremely strong soul skill after it evolved. The only drawback was that his opponents might be prepared if he kept using it. As it became stronger, Hu Yuhao could extend its use to a greater region. Right now, the region it could cover was around 10 meters in diameter. At the same time, he also possessed a special form of this soul skill that allowed him to carry out continuous assimilation. To put it more aptly, it allowed him to assimilate into the environment like a chameleon. Environmental assimilation became more and more effective as an environment became more complex and colorful. Hu Yuhao couldn't conceal himself, but he could make it seem as if he were hidden as he imitated his surroundings. However, he could still be discovered through meticulous observation or detected through spiritual power. His ability to assimilate into the environment was directly related to his soul power. As his Eye of Destiny was activated, his imitation had entered its strongest state. So, he appeared to disappear earlier. If Hu Yuhao stayed completely still, it wasn't possible to spot him with one's naked eyes. However, any movement would cause a change in the color patterns in the air, which would be detectable if one was sharp enough. In fact, Hu Yuhao didn't know how much further his imitation could evolve. It was closely related to the Skydream Iceworm. Imitation wasn't a particularly strong soul skill even in the world of soul beasts, or the Iceworm species wouldn't be so weak. After all, it was only projecting an illusion, there wasn't any offensive side to it. In addition, the region that it covered was also limited. Hua Yuhao exploited this opportunity to increase his speed significantly. As his body burst forward, he leapt into the air and entered the cave, leaving a gentle undulation behind. As he entered the cave, a thick smell of blood immediately filled his nostrils. He tried to hold his breath and unleashed his dark golden terror claws. He stabbed his claws into the wall of the cave as his body remained in the air. Using his spiritual detection, he had already figured out the layout of the cave. Otherwise, his judgment wouldn't have been so accurate. The cave was around 5 meters high and extremely wide. It was just that the ground was covered in bloodstains left behind by the female bear while giving birth to her kids. In the corner, 2 dark golden terraclaw bear cubs not even a meter tall were curled up with their eyes closed. Occasionally, they would squirm in place. Their fur was pitch black and hadn't turned dark golden yet. From the looks of it, they were like 2 oversized and chubby puppies. At times, they would extend their pinkish-red tongues to lick their lips. Hua Yuhao didn't delay any further. His body swayed in the air before he did a forward somersault. At the same time, he had already unleashed his Snow Emperor spirit. The Snow Lady pointed to the 2 cubs, and 2 deep blue beams of light were shot out. The cubs were engulfed by these beams of light, and were enclosed inside 2 blocks of ice. While mature dark golden terraclaw bears were huge, their cubs were very small in comparison, just like the cubs of any other soul beast. Hua Yuhao drifted down, his hands were covered in blue light. He touched the bodies of the 2 frozen cubs, and they instantly disappeared, swept inside his starlight sapphire ring. However, his claws stabbed into the wall when he was just a couple steps from the exit. He also stuck his body to the wall like an octopus, and his imitation activated again. He seemed to have disappeared, and was completely traceless in the dark cave. Whoosh! A figure entered the cave. It was Zhong Lidi. His figure was covered by a thick, bloody radiance. Right now, the strong evil soul master's appearance was quite unpresentable. Even with his cultivation, it was still a horrible thing to be struck by a Class 7 stationary soul cannon shell off guard. His long robe was torn and tattered, revealing his skin in many areas. His hair was also standing on end. While his staff was still shining, it was no longer as bright as before. The gem at the top of his staff had even cracked slightly. Zhong Lidi's expression was extremely ghastly, and he even appeared to be on the verge of crying. When he unleashed bright, bloody light to illuminate the entire cave, his face turned even more dismal. Liren, someone has beaten us to it. Bastard! Zhong Lidi shouted in fury. His figure flashed as he rushed out of the cave. An 8-ringed soul Dolua was able to fly temporarily. Zhong Liren's voice sounded, that cannon shell earlier must have been at least Class 7. Don't tell me that there are Sun Moon Empire people here? They can't be missing. The female bear was even guarding the cave earlier. How could they have disappeared just like that? Can they fly? Hua Yuhao was completely still as he stuck himself to the wall. He was even holding his breath. He was clear that he would be a dead man if he moved in front of these 2 evil soul masters. Unless it was completely safe, he wouldn't move recklessly. As he maintained his continuous imitation, Zhong Lidi returned again. As he returned, a huge number of beast spirits were released from his staff. They quickly filled the cave. Vicious, Hua Yuhao cursed. As the spirits flew out, a tiger-type beast spirit came straight towards Hua Yuhao. His imitation was indeed strong, and could even imitate the surrounding aura. However, these beast spirits had acute senses. From the change in the tiger-type beast spirit's energy, Hua Yuhao could subtly feel that it had discovered something in his direction. What should he do? He had 2 choices now: bet on his luck that the beast spirit wouldn't discover him, or act decisively and take the initiative to escape the cave. If he had no luck, this cave would become his burial ground. However, Zhong Liren was guarding the cave outside if he went for the latter option. At this point, a deafening roar came from outside the cave. Following this, the ground started to shake. A ferocious, mighty aura could be felt even from inside the cave. Yes, the female dark golden terraclaw bear had given up on finding her mate and returned. Zhong Lidi's expression changed. Even with their cultivation level, they couldn't underestimate this 10,000-year dark golden terraclaw bear. When the 3 of them had encircled the male dark golden terraclaw bear earlier, they had needed 3 days to kill him. Although this female bear was in a weakened state now, she might be very explosive if she was provoked. Zhong Lidi scanned the cave once more, then immediately rushed out, worried about Zhong Liren. The tiger-type beast spirit that was closing in on Hua Yuhao was pulled back into the staff. Hua Yuhao was intelligent. When he heard the female bear roaring, he gave up his plan of escaping. He reaped the rewards of his patience. Zhong Lidi was finally gone. However, he couldn't escape, either. The fight outside had already begun. The clash of soul powers caused the ground to shake amidst deafening booms. Intense shockwaves struck the cave and caused echoes to ring out within it. Although Hua Yuhao couldn't see with his eyes, he still had his spiritual detection. As he activated his spiritual detection, he sensed what was going on outside and tried to find an opportunity to escape. The female bear had indeed returned. Her lower body was covered in bloodstains while her upper body was charred. Evidently, she was in great pain after being struck by the cannon shell earlier. However, why did she forsake her mate and return? The three brothers had no intention of letting her off. Not only was she strong, but her spirit was also quite valuable. On the other side, the male bear's spirit had managed to tackle almost the entire team from Shrek. This included Cai Maya, who was a titled Dolor. Part 1 ends here.